Wild times. What is going on? My goodness. Art supplies, all kinds of things. Welcome, 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 welcome. I'll be covering Joe Biden's epic speech tonight. So because of that, I'm with you today for an early afternoon broadcast in front of the amazing epic bookshelf. Do folks remember the amazing epic bookshelf? The amazing epic bookshelf. Well, here it is. This is the amazing epic bookshelf. Before the pandemic, we would have all of our streams here in front of the amazing epic bookshelf. It's a lovely day. I'm sitting here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment, ready to engage with you, talk with you, and have a great conversation this afternoon. So welcome. Glad to be here. Hope I can spend a little bit with our lovely audience here. I've got plenty of unnamed diet beverage. It is not too late to drink it. Remember that caulking sound, right? There we go. Pouring the unnamed diet beverage. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. That's very important, so you get notified about all our future conversations. And let's have a great time. Let's have a lovely afternoon conversation. I've got some things that I certainly want to say to you. I've got a whole new packet of pens I just bought from the dollar store in my neighborhood, so I'm opening the packet of pens, right? I went outside today. I assumed it would be like the other days recently where I had to wear a coat. That was a big mistake. It's lovely weather here in New York City, so I definitely won't be wearing a coat when I go back outside later. It's really a nice day. But I'm sitting here, and we are going to have a conversation. So the way it works here is that you send me super chats. I write them down. I give my opening remarks, writing down the super chats as I give the opening remarks. Then I do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. And then after that, I answer your super chat questions. And that's how we do the show. So that's really the format we're using here. So keep the super chats rolling in. I've got plenty of unnamed diet beverage that I will continue to consume. I also have some unnamed water beverage, so that'll keep my throat hydrated as I speak to all of you. Let's have a great conversation today. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. If you've got a super chat, shoot it my way. And let's just roll right in to the opening remarks. Let's roll right into it. Folks, it's nice to be here in front of the bookshelf. We've been doing lives here for a little while. It used to be one a week in front of the bookshelf. But now we do them a lot more frequently. The pandemic happened. And everything that we've been talking about on these live streams for so long has become far, far more relevant. Over the past year and a half, the concepts that we have discussed on here, the breakdown of capitalism and American imperialism, the drive toward a low-wage police state, the danger of a new world war, all of these topics have become far, far more relevant. Folks, my name is Caleb Maupin, and I am here to uncancel you. Let me repeat that. My name is Caleb Maupin, and I am here to uncancel you. The ruling class of the United States, the big bankers and corporations, the ultra-rich monopolists, the billionaire capitalist class has canceled millions of American working families. At one point, they had an arrangement with us. And that arrangement went like this. They got to bomb Korea and bomb Vietnam. They got to bomb Cuba. Well, they did try to sabotage and destabilize Cuba. They got to threaten China, threaten Russia. But in exchange for that, as long as we waved our flags and said, "Woo, we're number one, we're number one," we got houses, cars, TV sets, refrigerators. And that was the arrangement. And it also involved a domestic arrangement. They got to lock up the African American community, condemn black people in the United States to lives of poverty and police state repression and brutality. They got to torture and brutally repress the Latino and Chicano community. But those of us who were white, as long as we waved our flags, as long as we said racism isn't real, it's made up by crazy left-wing activists, as long as we continued to go along with the system, as long as we continued to cheer for their ugly wars and police state repression, as long as we did that, we got houses, we got cars, we got TV sets, we got the highest standard of living in the world in exchange for being the loyal labor aristocracy of empire. But folks, that contract has been terminated. We have been canceled. The billionaire ruling class of the United States no longer needs a wealthy, prosperous middle class in the homeland. They have eliminated our jobs with technology, automation. They have determined that it is in their interest to set up a low-wage police state. They have determined that it is in their interest to destroy the lives of working families across the country with opioids rather than provide them with decent employment. And the grinding wheels of international capitalism has canceled the American working class. What it has been doing to black and brown people since the moment this country was founded, what it's been doing to people all over the world in order to preserve their system of capitalism, where profits come first, they are now doing to the bulk, the overwhelming majority of people in the United States. The working class of the United States is being canceled. We are witnessing the controlled demolition of the American dream. They are destroying the lives of working families, grinding the United States deeper and deeper into poverty, imploding it into just another docket, just another hub in their global system of finance capital. And I am here to uncancel you. I am here to offer the way forward. And that way forward is called solidarity. That way forward is called socialism. That way forward is called dismantling American imperialism. That way forward is called black and white unite and fight. That way forward is called building a new America, where the banks and the factories and the major centers of economic power are controlled by the people, where profits are no longer in command, and friendship and mutual development goes on between countries. That's what I'm here to do. I am here to uncancel you. I am here to offer you a way forward beyond the horrors of a dying system. And yes, even in the time that they had this devil's bargain, this Faustian agreement with the American working class, even in that time, they were not being honest. They told us they were patriotic. Western. They told us they were patriots, but yet they had no problem setting up the NAFTA Free Trade Agreement, no problem setting up the World Trade Organization, no problem trying to break American unions, Vito Marcantonio, with their Taft-Hartley slave labor law. They were never patriotic. They were never loyal to the American working class. They always viewed us as mere useful idiots. Furthermore, they told us that they were Christians, didn't they? They said that the religion that many working families in the United States, Marxism, Christianity was a religion that was deeply, deeply dear to them. The ruling class and the politicians and the ultra-elite, not only did they say they were patriots who loved the country, they also said they were Christians. But we know that for decades ago, okay, so be it. For decades, the ruling class of the United States has traded in the Bible, the teachings of Jesus, for the teachings of Ayn Rand, the teachings of Anton LaVey, the teachings of Milton Friedman and Friedrich von Hayek, the forces that say compassion is weakness, the forces that say human solidarity and brotherhood is just an illusion, the teachings of Sigmund Freud, who says it is impossible to love your neighbor as yourself, and so give up on the whole prospect. We know that these rulers of the United States, the leaders of the big four super major oil companies, Exxon, Mobil, BP, Shell, and Chevron, we know that the leaders of the huge Wall Street banks, HSBC, General Electric, Bank of America, we know the owners of Boeing, military contractors like Raytheon. We know that these forces are not patriots. They do not love the United States of America. Furthermore, we know that they are not Christians. They do not believe in the concept of love your neighbor as yourself, the concept that the last shall be first and the first shall be last, the belief that one should live for the sake of others and build a family of all mankind, break down racial and religious divisions, and care for the least among us. They do not believe in these teachings. They're not patriots. They're not Christians. They are capitalists. They are loyal only to the dollar, only to the international financial system that grinds the world into greater and greater poverty so that more and more wealth centralizes in the hands of a few. They want to develop technology, but not for the purpose of making a better life and making a more fruitful, abundant society. No, they want to develop technology so they can eliminate jobs, eliminate workers from the assembly line, so that they can set up an apparatus of production where a single laptop might be made in 40 different countries, where workers across the world must compete for the lowest possible wages and worst possible living conditions. They talk about climate change and global warming, not because they are concerned about the real devastating impact that is having on working people's lives. The fact that, that many are left hungry, that droughts are devastating certain regions of the world, that it's going to lead to bigger hurricanes and climate-related disasters. They're not concerned about climate change for that reason. They are using climate change to attack China. They are using climate change to say to countries in Africa that need to build power plants in order to electrify their country and industrialize, to tell them that they can't do it. They are using climate change to eliminate not only the jobs of American workers, but the jobs of the American small businessman. And just like they are using the climate change, they are using the COVID-19 pandemic for their own ends. Right? The latest news item that you may have noticed is that while China has no intellectual property protections of its vaccine, has given anyone in the world with the ability to produce their vaccine permission and the ability to do so. Bill Gates the Silicon Valley fascist, the Silicon Valley high-tech Malthusian, has declared, oh no, we cannot lift the intellectual property rights for the Western vaccines. You know, you are in the developing world and you want Moderna's vaccine, if you want Pfizer's vaccine, if you want Johnson and Johnson, if you want their vaccine, Congress, you've got to pay. You've got to pay. You've got to pay up. The big drug giants have got to make profits from the vaccine, while China may give their vaccine away. The United States has got to make sure that Big Pharma gets paid, even though our tax money was given to Big Pharma. Even though public funds were given to these Big Pharma corporations in order to create their vaccine, they still feel that they should own it. They should have a piece of paper that says, this vaccine belongs to me. And anyone who gets it, there should be some money that trickles into the pockets of the ultra-rich. But then, after they refuse to do what China has done, after they refuse to give their vaccine away, after they refuse to let people who have the capacity to produce their vaccine have the plans and the intellectual property to actually declassify and produce it, after they do that, well, then what do? They bemoan the vaccine diplomacy of Russia and China. Because Russia and China, two countries that are certainly coming from a different position in the world than the United States, because their vaccine is popular around the world, this is considered to be a threat to national security. We now know that the government of the United States lobbied Brazil not to approve the Russian vaccine. We know that there are programs throughout the world where U.S. intelligence is working to undermine the Russian and Chinese vaccine, while at the same time refusing to declassify and enable people around the world to reproduce the Moderna, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson vaccines. This shows you the ugly nature of their system. And Bill Gates, the Microsoft billionaire who constantly speaks of overpopulation. There are just too many poor people in the world. There are just too many poor people in the world. I mean, obviously they'd be rich if they had any value. They'd start a tech company like I did. Gee golly, I'm Bill Gates, and all these poor people in the world, I mean, why are they allowed to reproduce? We got to stop them from doing that. I mean, we just got to figure out, can we figure out, a way to make sure these poor people don't reproduce? This is the nature, U.S. equivalent. This is the nature of capitalism in its last days. The pandemic devastated the U.S. economy. Because we are not a fully unified country, we could never fully lock down. And because we never fully locked down, it seems like we're never able to fully open up. We have a capitalist system where profits are in command, where different for-profit institutions are competing with each other and have different interests. And it was very, very hard to get the entire country on the same page. We don't have a planned economy. We don't have a state, central plan. We don't have socialism here. We have capitalism. Every capitalist is doing whatever they want. 50 states, every one having its own strategy to deal with the pandemic. Donald Trump, even though President Xi Jinping told him the virus was transmitted by air, told him, we have the tape where President Xi Jinping told Donald Trump the virus was transmitted by air. Even though that's the case, Donald Trump still said, I don't know if wearing a mask is the best thing. Wouldn't put on a mask for months. For months he wouldn't put a mask on. Meanwhile, we've seen just a devastation of restaurants, restaurant workers, New York City, the city that never sleeps. My home for the last 10 years has basically been turned into a state of almost permanent hibernation. Stores are boarded up, and hungry, homeless people are everywhere. This is America. This is the American capitalist system. This is the state of affairs in a system where profits come before people, where human life is devalued. You would think that with China's economy rolling ahead, and with Russia's economy rolling ahead, that now, as our economy is on the rocks, unemployment, poverty, you would think that now, more than ever, we would reach out to Russia, reach out to China, and say, let's do business. Let's make it happen. Right? You think we would go to China and say, hey, you know how you're really good at building those trains? Well, gee, we don't have high-speed railway in the USA, so we're going to hire your Chinese engineers, your Chinese scientists. We're going to hire some of the millions of unemployed people. We're going to build some high-speed railway across America. Now might be the right time to do that. Imagine how much better the economy of the United States could be if one could hop on a train in New York and get off in Los Angeles in just a few hours. Imagine how much better the economy would be, especially if all those workers got hired to build such things. That would be amazing, right? And trains are much better in terms of climate change. They don't produce nearly as much pollution, right? Get away from the car economy, the car culture, and the gas guzzlers and the car accidents on the road. Build some modern high-speed railway. But that's not what Joe Biden's doing. Oh, no. I think we'd reach out to Russia. We'd say, hey, Russia, you're really good at oil and natural gas. We are too. Maybe we could have some joint ventures. Maybe some of our big oil companies and our fracking companies could team up with Gazprom and Rosneft. We could figure out how to extract oil and natural gas in a much more efficient way, burn it in a much more clean and environmentally friendly way. You would think that the call from Russia's President Vladimir Putin for an international effort around fusion energy would become urgent, and that instead of spending and wasting billions of dollars on war and threatening Iran with war and escalating the U.S. military presence in the Middle East, the United States and Russia and China and Iran and all the countries of the world would come together to demand and fight for fusion energy. And a huge international crash project would be organized to get fusion energy now. It is urgent in terms of climate change. It is urgent in terms of fossil fuels and getting us off of the travesty and the trap of an oil-based global order. And you would think now would be the time, with the economy devastated, with climate change hanging over our heads, now would be the time to sign an international treaty. Russia, China, the United States, Venezuela, Iran, Cuba, Brazil, every major country, India, all coming together immediately to demand and do everything we can to get fusion energy. You would think that that would be the thing. That would be common sense government. That's what Abraham Lincoln would do. That's what Franklin Delano Roosevelt would do. But it is not what our leaders are doing. FDR, JFK-esque. It's not what our leaders are doing. Folks, there is a phrase that I have used before in these broadcasts, in these presentations. I've used it before, and I want to start using it again. And I want to start using it again. I want to start using it again far, far more liberally, because this is what we must keep in mind. Folks, when you walk through the streets of New York City, when I walk to the subway with my mask on my way to work, when I walk back to the subway on my way home, walk through my neighborhood, walk through Manhattan, getting to my office, I see devastated people. Devastated people. Soviet intellectual. I see devastated people. people that are struggling, people that are begging for money, people that are hungry, people that are talking to themselves and hallucinating, people that are strung out on drugs, people that are just devastated. When I talk to my relatives around the country, when I talk to the people that I grew up with, my small town in Ohio, who are scattered throughout the country trying to survive, as the Rust Belt that I grew up in has been devastated. When I speak to people who are interested in the ideas that I promote, and interested in the Center for Political Innovation, everywhere I go in the United States, I see despair. I see desperation. I see sadness. I see anger. I see so much pain. And I am a very lucky person. I've had many real opportunities in my life. Maybe not as many as some other people, but certainly more than many people. It's important to recognize what you have, to not deny the breaks you've gotten. So I'm lucky to be where I am. But regardless of the fact that I see so many people suffering, and I see so much desperation, I see so much fear, I see so much anger and resentment, I take a deep breath, and I breathe. And I remind myself, just like you should be reminding yourself, that in a weird, strange way, we are very, very, very lucky to be living in these times. I know that sounds absolutely crazy. You say, Caleb, how could anybody be lucky to be living in these times? Unemployment, pandemic, opioid addiction, chaos in the streets, rising crime, 76% shooting increase in New York City in 2020. How could anybody be lucky to be living in the times that we are living in, Caleb? That is a crass, insensitive thing for you to say. I am looking at paying my bills now. I'm struggling. Caleb, how in the world can you sit there and say that we are lucky to be living in the time that we are living? How can you say that, Caleb? That is just such a crazy statement. How could you possibly believe that we are lucky to be living in these times? Folks, we are lucky to be living in these times because these are the last days of American imperialism. These are the last days. Let me repeat. These are the last days. These are the last days. These are the last days of American imperialism. In the 1930s, communists struggled, and they hoped that they could build a Soviet America. William Z. Foster wrote a beautiful book, Toward Soviet America, all about how this country could be saved from capitalism. But it didn't happen. Didn't happen. World War II, McCarthyism didn't happen. 1960s, there was all kinds of hope for a socialist revolution. You had all kinds of Maoists and Trotskyites and communist groups believing that there was going to be a revolution. They used to chant, revolution in our lifetime. It didn't happen. 1978, 79, there was even a communist group that put up posters that said, revolution in the 80s. Go for it. Well, it wasn't a revolution in the 80s. There wasn't a revolution in the 1930s. There was not a revolution in the 1960s. There wasn't a revolution in the 80s, despite the posters put up by the Bobavakian people. Revolution in the 80s, go for it. But folks, I do believe it is very possible that there could be a revolution in the 20s, if not in the 30s. We are living in the last days of the empire. And because we are living in the last days, because it is darkest before dawn, we are very, very lucky. All right, not end well for the planet. Not end. We are extremely lucky. We are extremely lucky. The people of the 1930s, people of the 1960s would kill to be in our shoes. We are seeing the last days of American empire. We are approaching the very beginning of a possible transition of the United States away from the wretched system of capitalism that puts profits over people and to a society where the people and their needs come first. These are the last days. These are the last days. And all of the suffering that we are seeing, all the horror all around us, all the unbearable pain, all the unemployment, all the hunger, all the boiling rage, all the frustration, all the fear, relationships, all the pain, all the isolation, all of this is how it has to happen. Right? This is how it has to happen. There wasn't a revolution in the 1960s because the working class, largely, was still living off that American dream. They still had that labor aristocracy bribe. And while the students were protesting, while the black community was in rebellion, most white Americans were Okie from Muskogee. I'm proud to be an Okie from Muskogee. They didn't like them protesters, right? In the 1930s, what was the biggest barrier? It was racism, Jim Crow segregation. In the South, you had the Jim Crow system, you had deeply racist ideas well inculcated among the population. Roosevelt tried to push back against racism. He had Eleanor Roosevelt make anti-racist statements, but even the Roosevelt coalition was kind of cornered into a situation where they were almost compromising with the Jim Crow South. But now we're in a period. We're in a period where the working class of the United States is more integrated than ever, where the mythology of American empire, the ideology that held American capitalism together, has been widely refuted and debunked. We have a whole generation of young people who don't believe the lies that held this society together any longer. We're facing the economic meltdown that Karl Marx predicted in his book Capital, that as high tech eliminated jobs and drove wages down, eventually there would be an army of unemployed people who would rise up and seize control of the means of production, the natural process of the capitalist. Eliminating jobs with labor, driving wages down, leads to a glut in the market. Nelson Peary talks about this in his book, The Future is Up to Us. We are entering the crisis. This is the Götterdämmerung. This is the final conflict. I don't know if you've ever heard the Internationale, the communist theme song that was sung all over the world. Well, the chorus says, "'Tis the final conflict." That's now. It's not now, but it's approaching. U.S. dollar collapse. We are heading toward the final conflict. Now, I want to be realistic, folks, because there's not going to be a revolution tomorrow. There's not going to be a revolution tomorrow. And we're going to talk about what we mean by revolution also, because there's a lot of confusion about that as well. But folks, in the lead up to the American Revolution, there was a widespread spiritual awakening across the country. They called it the Great Awakening. In the lead up to the Civil War, the Second American Revolution, the abolition of slavery, there was the Second Great Awakening. And I argue that now we are in the midst of the Great Socialist Awakening of the United States, the Third Great Awakening, preceding the transition to socialism in the United States. That is the period that we are living in. We are approaching revolution. But before there can be a revolution, there must be a great awakening of the consciousness. And we are living in the Third Great Awakening, the Third Great American Awakening, the Third Awakening, the Socialist Awakening of America. We are in the last days of American empire, but the future is up to us. Now, when I talk about revolution, Folks, it is up to us. It's not inevitable. Right? The actions that we engage in have a big impact. And in order for the moment to be seized, in order for the moment to be utilized to save America from capitalism, there must be an ideological rectification. And that's what we're here to do. Marxism in the United States, Armenia, John. Marxism in the United States. Marxism in the United States has been corrupted. It's been tainted. It's been distorted. The synthetic left has made Marxism something that's very, very, very unappealing to average Americans. Many, many Americans really do believe, I'm putting another pillow behind my back. Many Americans believe that Marxists are a crazy bunch of people who want to destroy their country, destroy their communities. Many Americans believe Marxists are people that hate them. Many Americans believe that that leftists want everyone to be poor, so it's equal. Many Americans believe leftists want to destroy the country, to take revenge for white privilege or something like that. There's been a huge, huge effort by the CIA to manipulate our movement. You can read about the Congress for Cultural Freedom. There's been a huge, huge distortion of what it means to be a revolutionary and a leftist by the revolutionary intelligentsia. And if socialism is actually going to seize the moment, it needs a complete reworking. It needs a complete makeover. After Trump was elected in 2016, I went to Weirton, West Virginia, and I spoke with a steel worker. And he told me that the Democrats, he voted for Trump, he said, because the Democrats stopped caring about the working man and became a bunch of socialists. I asked him what a socialist was, and he told me, basically told me Antifa. He described Antifa. It's heartbreaking. But that's what you would believe, right? The voices purporting to represent socialism are not optimistic. They're not optimistic. They don't want things in America to get better. No, they are the most pessimistic, negative people. The most hostile, negative people. Sitting there with their microphones, bleep, bleep, bleep. These bleeping corporations have bleeping, too much bleeping money. Bleep this country. This country is bleeping racist. I want free stuff. Bleep you, bleep you. Negativity. Negativity. Hostility. Hatred. They hate average Americans. Nobody hates average Americans more than the fake bread tube internet socialists. They think average Americans are all in the Ku Klux Klan. They think average Americans are all a bunch of racist, transphobic white settlers. Nobody hates average Americans more than the fake left. Nobody hates average Americans more than the fake left does. Nobody. And there's been such an effort to distort our movement and what it stands for. There's been such an effort to confuse people, such an effort to distort everything that we're about. Okay.